Hi, I'm Deborah McPherson, Web Editor at Nautilus International. Joining me is Dr. Genevieve Waterhouse, Chair of Trustees for Safer Waves, a support group for seafarers who've experienced crime at sea. She's also a lead researcher for their current survey, which we're here to talk about today. Welcome, Dr. Waterhouse.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this important topic.
Sure. Well, can you start by describing the crime reporting at sea project and what it hopes to achieve, first with the survey into sexual assault at sea?
Sure, absolutely. So the issue of sexual assault and sexual harassment at sea has only fairly recently come to the attention of the general public and sort of leaders in the maritime world. And that has partly been due to kind of incredible work from people like the CEO of Safer Waves and other welfare organisations, but also the amazing bravery of victims to come forward and tell their stories in public and to the press. And what has really been kind of identified from that sharing of their experiences is that the current resources available to victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment aren't really fit for purpose when it comes to seafarers. And so that Safer Waves has been working with Devon and Cornwall Police to really try and create something more tailored for the seafarer experience. In that process, in trying to plan that, it's come to light that there is absolutely no data on the topic, though. So we have absolutely no idea how many offences are being committed, how many people are being affected, and therefore how many people are likely to require those resources. So we don't know whether it's 50% of seafarers, 95% of seafarers, or 5% of seafarers. And so that's where this survey comes in, that myself and Dr. Gary Lancaster, Dr. Rachel Wilcock, and some others at the University of Winchester have put together an entirely anonymous survey. And the idea is basically to try and get an idea of how many people are experiencing these offences as victims or as witnesses, to then feed into trying to build those resources to support them both legally and psychologically.
I see. And so, what are some of the difficulties of reporting crime at sea, and why is it more of a problem than ashore?
There are many, many difficulties. So some of them are very practical. So, if you're out at sea, you may not have access to the internet, you may not be able to make a phone call, and so you may not be able to report to someone who's not on the ship. That there are many reasons why you may not want to report to someone on board. So that can include being concerned about re-victimization, being concerned about not being believed, and also just being seen as a difficult colleague. And that there's also a very hierarchical structure on board ships. And so that if the perpetrator has a kind of higher status on board, it may also be very concerning to tell anyone, especially if they're the person you're meant to tell. There's also complexities around the fact that there are different jurisdictions, legal jurisdictions, dependent on where the offence occurs, and that's very complex and very difficult for victims to actually navigate. That sometimes the actual people that you're meant to go to are the flag state, which obviously can result in a victim having no connection to the country that they're meant to be reporting to. And that may even be that they don't share a language, they may not share a definition of the offence. And so that also causes huge difficulties for victims. Then there are also psychological and professional barriers. So that psychological difficulties may be that people don't actually even identify what's happened to them as an offence. That we find this both ashore and at sea, that victims often believe that they are to blame when these offences happen. And when you're isolated at sea, you may not have the opportunity to speak to friends and family, which could help you to identify the fact that this is not your fault, that this is absolutely something that you have had committed against you and is an illegal act, and that therefore you may want to report it and get help. And then finally, the professional barriers. Absolutely validly, people might be concerned about the impact it would have on their future career and their chances of getting contracts. It's a really difficult area, and it combines kind of the complexities of a domestic setting with the difficulties of a professional relationship, and that's fairly unique because you know, you have people who are at sea living with their perpetrator for possibly months on end, but yet it may be a completely professional relationship. There may also be a romantic relationship associated with it, but it's just therefore much more difficult because it's got multiple layers of complexities, basically.
Definitely complex. So, what are some of the legal jurisdictions that have precedence at sea?
My understanding is that if it is conducted on international waters, that then you have to talk to the flag state, and that if it's in, you know, at ports, then I would imagine that the jurisdiction is then wherever you are based. But I'm afraid I don't know the ins and outs of that. That's not quite within the survey's remit.
Yeah, sure. As a union, we are concerned about what is happening with flag states and, you know, what legal jurisdictions come into play there. But are seafarers also able to seek medical attention or report assaults on board? Is that another one of the problems? Or if not, why not?
So as I've said, there are many complexities around reporting assaults. In terms of the medical side, my understanding is that all ships have some basic medical supplies that basically be sufficient for what's required when you've experienced a sexual assault. That may not be the case for the larger international passenger ships where there are doctors and nurses. But even if the medical option is there, that there are still those concerns about confidentiality, about whether it's going to impact the rest of your time on board. Then you can go ashore, obviously, to get medical attention, but my understanding is, again, that you have to obtain permission from a senior officer. And so, again, you're having to report to someone on board. It is worth noting here that in terms of a full forensic medical examination, that basically the sooner you get it done, the better. And that is incredibly difficult on board because obviously you need to go ashore. But having said that, it is possible to still get usable samples within 7 days of the offence. So even if you're not able to go immediately or the day after, it may still be worth going and getting that forensic medical examination up to a week after the offence occurring. Right. So the survey covers quite a wide variety of different sexual offences. So we have rape, sexual assault by penetration, other forms of sexual assault, and also asks about child sexual offences, because of course some people of 16 can be on board ships.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's a variety, and we're looking at all of those because they all require legal and psychological support.
Okay. And I noticed the survey also welcomes respondents who've not experienced or witnessed any offences. Why is that?
So really, ideally, what we'd have done with this survey is that we would have got a list of every single UK seafarer who'd been at sea within the last 5 years and sent out an email to a random sample, and then asked them to complete the survey. But that's not possible because there is no list of UK seafarers. So what we're having to do is really rely on social media and key organisations like Nautilus to help us spread the word. And what we're looking to get is as large a response as possible so that we can say that this is, you know, quite a substantial number of seafarers. And so it's likely to represent the vast majority of them. And then that gives us a better understanding of what's happening as a whole rather than just a tiny subsample. And so therefore we're asking as many seafarers to complete it as possible, those that have experienced it, but also those that haven't.
Okay. So what are some of the main difficulties, do you think, in trying to get people to take part in a survey on such a sensitive topic?
So there are a variety of difficulties that, because of the sensitive topic, that people may feel nervous about sharing their experiences, and that's perfectly understandable. So what we've done to try and overcome that is, as I said, it's entirely anonymous, and that we are not asking for lots of detail about the offence itself. So we're not asking you to sit down and give us an essay about what happened to you, that what instead we're asking you to do is to complete some multiple choice questions. So it's all tick box. And we want to know what offences you have experienced, either as a victim or a witness, which types of vessels those happened on, whether you reported it, and if so, to whom, and then a very, very basic sort of what happened after that. And again, that's a tick box process. So the idea is that we're hoping not to really kind of drudge up a lot of difficult memories for people. Although obviously even that level of kind of surface information can have a psychological impact. So we have provided a list of support services that we really encourage respondents to reach out to if they are having any emotional impact from their experiences. The other issue that we have is, as I said, because we're trying to get both people who have and haven't experienced it, a lot of people who haven't experienced these things sort of see it as irrelevant and so won't complete it. So we're very keen to have people who have not experienced it to also complete it. And then because we're reliant on social media, it's kind of classic, you know, it gets lost in a feed. It's very easy for people to just kind of skip over. But this is a very important topic and we are very keen to have people respond. And we've also tried to keep it as short as possible. So it's, as I said, all multiple choice. You're not having to sit there and type out lots of information. And it's a maximum of 16 questions, some of which are yes, no. And that's, you may not actually have to complete all 16 questions. It depends on whether how you've answered some of the earlier ones.
Right.
Yeah, so difficulties in terms of, you know, emotional response, but also actually just getting people to complete it.
Oh, that's really helpful to know. Thanks. And how are you protecting people's privacy?
So the survey is entirely anonymous, so we don't ask for names or addresses or anything like that. All we're asking is age, gender, ethnicity, and what type of vessels they've worked on. So we can't possibly identify people based on that information. We also, as I said, are not asking for specific details about the offence, so we are not able to identify the offence based on that information either. And we also don't collect any information about your computer, so we're not collecting locations or IP addresses either. In terms of the reporting at the end, we certainly won't be discussing any individual responses, that it will be talking about the general responses. So it will be percentages of people who have talked about being a victim of this, etc., not this person said, blah, blah, blah.
How will the survey be used to help improve the process of crime reporting at sea?
So this is incredibly important to us. And so that we have really tried from the very beginning to engage key partners in the process of designing the survey. So that includes Nautilus, other charities and maritime organisations, unions, etc. So we've got them involved from the beginning, and the idea was to make it as useful as possible for all of those groups so that they can take the report at the end and put it into practice, be that in tailoring how they respond to victims or indeed putting into place things to try and reduce perpetration. So that report will go out and hopefully that will impact some of those. That we also, as I said, the work that we're doing with Devon and Cornwall was really the kind of driver for the whole thing, so that they will have the report as well, and we will be working with them. And hopefully, as long as the data is of good quality, and really the only thing that's dependent on is how many people respond. So the more people that respond, the better. That as long as it's of good quality, that should feed into their sort of obtaining funds and designing the kind of the extent of the resources available, you know, whether it's one person that can deal with all of them or whether this is going to be hundreds and hundreds of cases that need, you know, big teams nationally. So the idea is that these findings will really feed into the national response to sexual assault and sexual harassment and gender discrimination at sea.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Waterhouse. That's been a really interesting overview. And thank you to all those watching. on this channel, and we hope you be sure and take part in the survey. You can find out how on Nautilus International's website in the news section at nautilusint.org. And if you're a seafarer, we hope you will join the union as a member, of course. We are wherever you are.
Thank you very much.